Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for coming out today. Today is another in our fabulous series of educational webinars. My name is Eric Malice, and I'm the Chief Product Officer here at National Test Systems. I'm also the co-founder of National Test Systems, and I've got about 20 years experience. Actually, I think we're over 20 years now. Certainly feels like it some days. Ever since I started with this business, my main focus, my priority, my main drive, my interest in this business really was all about learning the technical side of things. I started this company with my brother, let him figure out how to do the sales, let him figure out how to do the logistics, let him figure out how to run a business. I'll sit back and I will study. I will learn every aspect of clinical toxicology. I will learn the ins and outs of both drug use and biology of drug use. That's always been my focus. And of course, because of that, I think it's very important. Just a simple fact that there's a good amount of you here giving me your time this afternoon, it makes me happy. It means it, to some extent, is important to you as well. And just in general, national test systems, that's our big focus. We want everybody to understand as much as I do. We want everyone to learn. We want everyone to be engaged in learning all of this stuff that we're going to bring to you. Hoping at very least to make your daily drug testing duties a little bit easier, but certainly at least a little bit more insightful. So again, today is another in our ongoing series of educational webinars, what we call collectively NTS University or NTSU. We're going to have about a 20-minute presentation today, and then after that, we'll have a question and answer session. As you can see on the left pane of your screen there's a spot for invite people, questions, polls, chats, and handouts. If you would please put your questions for the Q&A on the questions tab, that would be very helpful. And like I said, we're going to get to the questions at the end of the presentation. Now, if for some reason we are unable to get to every question today, just know that your consultant will be reaching out to you sometime in the next couple of days. And at that time, they'll answer, obviously, any questions we missed, but they'll also give you an opportunity to make a suggestion for future webinar topics, or even request a one-on-one training between me and your staff, either on this subject or another subject that you might find would be helpful to you and your staff. Also, today's is a little bit different in another regard. What we're going to be doing is we're going to give you an opportunity to obtain a certificate of completion for this training. We do this training frequently for either one-on-one or one-on-group with our facilities, and you'll take a quick 10-question questionnaire, and you will get a certificate of completion showing that you learned all this with me today. It's great. Hang it on your wall, frame it. It gives you just a little more validity. Proves that you know how these things work and you know what you're doing. So that's always a little bit nice to have something there to, kind of vouch for you, as it were. So what are we talking about? Today, we're going to do what I call boot camp or basic training. We're going to just go through the basics of how to do an instant drug test cup and also a dip and read instant test. Now, I tried to do this in a way that would make a nice flow between the collection procedure on both and then the reading procedure on both. And I'm entirely convinced I did it in the most jumbled, most confusing, roundabout way possible. But next time you tell me how it would be better. But I think we'll get through this okay. So let's start with the cup. Step one, the foil pouch. So this is a mainstay of every drug test. Every test you're going to get comes in a white foil pouch. You open a box of cups, you'll see 25 of these guys. It's got the catalog number in it, as you can see, which is basically the item number. It has a product description, which in this case tells you CLIA-waived drug test cup, and then it goes on to list the drugs that it's testing for, as well as their cutoff levels. And then it's got the lot number, and then the most important piece of information is the expiration date. Now, it is important to note, you cannot rely on the results of an instant drug test beyond its expiration dates. Now, in some cases, we're able to get a certificate of validity beyond expiration, usually extending the test for another 30 to 90 days, somewhere in there. But if you don't have a certificate for that exact lot and that exact test, do not trust the results after the expiration date. Now, listen, when we send these out to you, you're going to have usually no less than 18, 16, maybe a year at minimum on some of these. But if you're not careful, in some facilities this has happened to, somewhere in their storage cabinet, there's a box of tests that sits in the back and doesn't get pulled to the front when new inventory comes in. And then 3 years down the road, they find an expired test that's covered in dust. And you don't want to use that and rely on the results of it. So if you do come across a box of expired tests, please reach out. but more importantly, discard them or certainly don't rely on the results of them. This information can also be found on the label that's on the outside of the box. So you can find out when you pull that box out without necessarily having to pull each cup out individually. All right, so the white foil pouch, you're going to open that up, and inside you will see the cup itself, and you'll also see a couple of those little desiccant packets, the little do not eat packets. Good advice, by the way. Do shake the cup once, because sometimes you'll get one of those desiccant packets end up inside the cup, and it's fine, doesn't affect the cup in any way, but you do not want to have somebody donate a specimen on top of one of those desiccant packets. That could certainly affect the results that you're going to get. So again, this is the cup that you're going to give to the donor. They're going to go ahead and fill the cup and then put the lid back on, wiping off any excess, hopefully, wash their hands, give you the cup back. As far as filling, so the minimum fill volume, it's hard to show in this picture, and we'll get a better shot of that in a second, but the little black sticker in the bottom left of this shot here is the temperature strip. And again, we will get a better shot of that, I promise. But as long as as long as the urine is filled beyond that black temperature strip, you will get the full functionality of this cup. You'll get the temp strip, you get the test strips, you'll get the adulterant strips, everything will function as planned. It'll be perfect. Optimal fill, I would say, is about halfway. It's just an easy thing to say. Yep, fill up the cup halfway. Most laboratories need about 30 milliliters to do a confirmation test. So again, it doesn't really show well in this picture. You know what? Let me see if this works. It probably won't, but it's worth a try. No, we probably won't get a good shot of that. Trust me, there's graduating markings on the side showing 30 milliliter there toward the bottom. We got a 60 mil marking at about the halfway point, a 90, and then a 120 at the top. So this cup is essentially 120 milliliters. Again, minimum of making sure the cup works correctly is above that black line. Minimum to make sure the lab can do what they need to do would be that 30 milliliter marking. Halfway is a nice, easy thing to say, but do not overfill. What can happen with these tests is if you fill the urine level to the top, it can flood, what they call flooding. In other words, the urine goes over the top to the strips instead of wicking up through the bottom, which needs that wicking process to function correctly. If somebody does overfill a cup, simply read the temperature strip while that specimen is still fresh, and then dump part of the specimen into a second cup. Unfortunately, they cost you a cup in that regard. But again, if it's filled too high, you could risk not getting a valid or worse, getting a false result. So be careful with that. All right, so now we've collected our specimen. Let's go ahead and transition over to the dips, because while the collection for both varies only a little bit, but enough to make them separate, we're going to merge back together when we get back to reading the results, and that's pretty much where they become one and the same. Very few differences. So again, I'll go over this again real quickly because we've already been here. We're looking at the white foil pouch. We're looking at the catalog number. We're looking at the description. Again, the lot number can be important, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. And then, of course, the expiration date, which is crucial. The dip photos are a little out of date. You can see the expiration on this test is January of 2014. So I should probably update with some newer photos for my dip instructions. By the way, the dips just aren't as popular anymore as the cups are, for whatever that's worth. So once you've got the foil out, you're going to go ahead and collect the specimen. Now, we'll get on this a little bit better when we get to the cup, but a temperature strip is always recommended. Now, on the integrated cups, there's one affixed regardless. But when you're talking about collecting a specimen on your own to use a dip test, there's no special cup required. You can use, you know, the old Dixie Riddle cups, if anyone's old enough to remember those. Those are a favorite of mine. You know, the little solo cups people use. Whatever you have in the office is fine. You'll be able to collect the specimen, and you'll be able to dip the specimen and get it to function properly. But the temperature strip is nice because it is indicative of a specimen that is from the donor's body fresh. So one of the biggest methods of adulteration or trying to beat a drug test is substitution, where somebody brings in urine from an outside source, a friend, family member who they know has a clean specimen. The tricky part with that, though, is keeping that specimen at a valid temperature. So while the temperature strip won't completely negate this, it's still possible to do, it'll discourage a little, and in more cases, it'll make it evident if that's not a fresh specimen. The counter of that, unfortunately, is a lot of these companies that sell these devices or these products to beat a drug test, they also sell them with hand warmers or glove warmers. We're in Florida. We don't know from these things, but most of you guys up north will know what I'm talking about. So the intent there is you put the Ziploc bag or the little a vial or flask in your pocket, and you put it in there with the hand or the glove warmer. And if you're careful and you have a little bit of practice, you could probably keep that specimen to the 90 and 100 degree valid specimen level. So looking at this particular picture here, we see it says read the green color, and then it gives us markings for 90, 92, 94, 96, 98, and 100 degrees Fahrenheit. This picture is not really clear, unfortunately, but it is showing me a green line, or sorry, a green dot at the 96 degree marking. Really, anywhere between this 90 to 100 degree Fahrenheit should be considered a valid specimen temperature, and again, is indicative that the specimen did come from the donor's body at that time. Listen, there's no substitute for actual witnessed, visually witnessed collections. In other words, watching the specimen leave the donor's body from start to finish, but I know that's not always feasible. So this, again, a little help along the way to try and discourage someone from bringing in urine from an outside source. All right, so now that you've got your specimen on the dip test, what we're going to do is we're going to remove the test from the foil pouch, and then we're going to remove the caps, as you can see on the right, removing the cap to expose the strips, which you'll dip into the specimen, which is our next step. So you're going to want to take the test and dip it about halfway up the strips into the specimen. Now, somebody pointed this out to me yesterday. I'm setting a very bad example here because I'm not wearing gloves in this photo. It's from 2014. That's still not a good excuse, but especially now in COVID, I don't expect anyone to attempt a dip test without wearing gloves. So I'll accept the angry letters. I probably deserve them. But anyways, you're going to want to dip it about 10 seconds. Again, as you can see in our example there, we can see the strips starting to turn a pinkish color, indicating that they've gotten wet. We call this wicking. When the urine migrates up the strip, it's called wicking. And this is done by something called capillary action. Capillary action is basically the movement of a liquid regardless of what gravity is telling it to do. I mean, it sounds really cool, right? It sounds like we invented some really incredible technology, but really it's just a naturally occurring phenomenon. The same thing that allows, a sponge to work in outer space in zero gravity. So sounds cool. It is kind of cool. It's just not, it's not really technology in that regard. So with the dip test, once you see that you've got your wicking, again, about 10 seconds in, you're going to remove it from the specimen. You're going to replace the cap, and you're going to lay it flat. So now we're at about the same place in the process for both the cup and the dip. We've got the strips exposed to the specimen in this case, same as we had with the cup. So now we can go ahead and get into reading of the results. So we're going to bounce back and forth again to the cup here because I want to point out the temperature strip a little clearer on this one, and also the one other excellent feature of the cup, which is the privacy panel. So again, cup with a temperature strip is recommended. If you're going with the integrated cup, it's automatic. There's no, you don't get a choice. It's going to have a temperature strip, which is good. You want to read the temperature immediately after the specimen is collected, no later than 1 minute if possible. The dot will stick around a little while after the temperatures come down, but you don't want to keep it around too long, regardless. And then lastly, again, the 90 to 100 degree Fahrenheit range indicates a valid specimen. So as you can see on the cup, it's got one of the newer versions of the temperature strip. We also have the Celsius marking on the bottom. So in addition to that 90 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit range, we've got that 32 to 38 degree Celsius range indicating a valid specimen. And in this case, we can see a nice clear green dot on our 98 degrees Fahrenheit. So this specimen is showing that it's probably a fresh specimen. Excuse me. The next thing you're going to want to do on the cup is you're going to peel back the privacy panel. So that privacy panel is basically covering the strips, covering the results of the test. Now, the reason that they have this privacy panel in the first place, it allows the person who's performing the screen to control the conversation. So if you've got people that, your participants or your patients or clients that are maybe even difficult to begin with, they would love to know what that result says before you do, because they would love to start the conversation with you on your back foot. So this is a little tip or a little helper to get you guys to be the first ones to view the result, because it really is imperative for your job to control where the conversation is going to go, whether it's, somebody losing, I don't know, whatever the case may be, whatever the punishment, if it's punishment, whatever the situation is, it helps you if you're able to lead the conversation where you need the conversation to go. So that's the reason they include the privacy panel on there. So once you've peeled back the privacy panel, the first thing we're going to do is read the adulterant strips. Now, for those of you who aren't testing adulterants, Um, I'll let it slide. I'm going to give you some really good reasons why this is a good idea. And if you want to go back and watch my recording of my webinar on adulterants, I'll give you even more reasons why this is a good idea. And I'll also say this, the one nice thing about the dip tests, although you saw barehanded with no gloves during COVID, I can't see why anyone would prefer the dip test. But one nice thing about the dip test is you could run an adulterant test first, run a separate adulterant test first. And if it turns out that that specimen has been adulterated or otherwise not valid, then you don't have to waste a $5 test because you're not going to be able to rely on the results. But for the most part, everyone likes the convenience of having everything all in one. So that's fine too, as long as you're testing adulterant. So basically what you're doing with the adulterant test is you're comparing the colored pad on the test to the corresponding color on the color chart that comes in each box of tests. And we're hoping that the color it shows matches one of the colors in the normal range on our comparison chart. Now, I'm not going to go all the way through this because we'll be here all day, but just a real quick lesson and then a real quick reason on it. So just focusing on the first one, the top on our test there is the creatinine level. And we can see the color of that pad versus the color on the adulteration chart is somewhere between the low normal range and then the higher normal range between 20 milligrams per deciliter and 100 milligrams per deciliter. So in this case, we've got a specimen that checks out, so it's okay. Now here's the thing. In addition to adulteration, really what these things are called are specimen validity checks. So you can easily have a specimen that's invalid, either too diluted or some foreign agent, but it wasn't someone necessarily trying to beat the drug test. They weren't, they didn't have the plan of beating or cheating the drug test, and maybe they just drank a lot of water that morning for whatever reason. So if you are getting creatinine, for example, that's down near that 20 milligram per deciliter range, it might not meet the legal definition of diluted, but the average adult, the average creatinine level for an adult is about 120 or 140. So if we're seeing creatinine down at the 20, you may be too diluted. There might be too much water in that specimen to have enough concentration of the target substance to give us a positive result. So again, they maybe didn't try and beat the test, but it just might be so diluted that you're not going to have enough of it in there to trigger a positive result. So again, I could give you an hour on just why I think adulterates are important, but I'll let it go at that for now, and we can move on from there. So again, we're at the 3 to 4 minute mark here. It should only take you about a minute to read the adulterant. Once you get the hang of it, you'll get it done in 30 seconds. You'll know what to look for the abnormal colors. Then we're going to shoot for the 5 minute mark here is when we're going to read the result of the test. So luckily, as you can see on the bottom of the cup there, they've given us a little answer key. We see 2 lines, the control and the test line, negative result. We see in the second example, control line, kind of a faint test line, still a line, negative result. To the right of that, we see a positive result where we see only the control line and no test line. And that got kind of cut off in this photo here, but the 2 ones on the right where it shows no control line, regardless if there's a test line, that strip or that test is invalid, or that strip is invalid. It just means that strip, for whatever reason, did not function correctly. Now, this might happen from time to time. You might see it 1 in 100 cups, maybe. If you start to see this with any regularity, if you start to see more than 1 in 100, definitely reach out to us because we don't want you to have to struggle with these. They're supposed to be making your job easier. Remember, we started that way. So if you start to see that with any regularity, please let us know. When it does happen, and again, it might not, but it probably will, what you can do is read the rest of the test and then dump part of that specimen or all the specimen into a second cup, and then simply read the one result that was missed. Keep track of these loosely in your head. If you see 2 100, you may not want to take immediate action, but we might want to reimburse you all the same. Before in the conversation, I pointed out the lot number. While that's not important until you need it, if it is turned out that you've got 3 in 100 and we're saying, let's just give you different tests, really what we want to give you a different lot. So if something like that were to happen, we would want to know what lot number this was occurring on so we can make sure we give you a different lot. So again, reading it is pretty easy. You can see in this particular instance, we've got a positive THC result because we can clearly see there is no test line. And that's really all there is to it. So let me give you some tips and some tricks and point out an example of some poor lines, or a poor line anyway. So let's focus on the poor line since it matches this photo. Starting from right to left, we can see that methadone, nice clear control, nice clear test line, looks beautiful. Same with the barbiturate. To the bupe to its left, we see a nice clear control line, but we don't see any hint of a test line. There's no color, there's no shadow. It's definitely a clear positive result on that buprenorphine. Moving on, we get the oxycodone with nice clear lines, and then that brings us to the TCA panel. Now, this is an extreme example of what a horrible line can do. So you can see the test line on the right side of it. Nice, starts off pretty good, and then it fades, and then it kind of gives away completely. Then it comes back a little bit, but never really that strong. But looking at that, you can see there is that color there. There is that color in good amount of, good part on the right, a little bit on the left. And again, it's not solid and it's not complete. But anytime you see that color, that line should be considered a line and therefore a negative result. Also important to note that an instant test is a preliminary result. This is a screen test. And any good practice and the manufacturer's recommendation is it should go to a laboratory for confirmation via a different methodology. So real quick, a word on methodology. An instant test, or what they call an immunoassay. It's the same with like a desktop analyzer, anything like that. This is considered a chemical result. Basically what that means is this test works when the drug itself meets the antigen or the antibody from the animal that it was pulled from and either allows the dye to show through or does not. So because it is a chemical that relies on specific antigens, it is possible for things to cross-react. For example, we all know that buspirone will cause a positive on a fentanyl test. On any fentanyl test you give me some buspirone, I'll give it a positive fentanyl test. So that's why lab confirmation is so important. At the laboratory, the methodology they use is something called a visual result. Every atom and every molecule in the known universe has a very unique fingerprint that can be read via GCMS, LCMS, any kind of mass spectrometry. They can read an element essentially perfectly, as accurately as a fingerprint, if not more so. I mean, it's the same equipment they use to tell how old and how far away a star is, and what it's made out of. So it's incredibly accurate equipment, and it's basically foolproof, or as close as you can get to being foolproof. A couple other things. If you are looking at a result and you're having a little bit of trouble trying to make the determination if there's a line or not, one tip I've always told people is you cover the neighboring strips with your thumbs so you can focus on the one strip that's giving you a headache. We don't want you to have to stand on your head, walk it outside. You should be able to easily view the result. This tip can sometimes save you time. So something like this, if I can get it on camera, but something like that. So you're basically covering the neighboring strips so you can focus on the one strip by itself. Another thing is the result should be read at 5 minutes. If you're struggling with it, or you think you're going to need to have a conversation with someone about it after that 5 minutes, take a photograph right there and then. You want to have the photo somewhere between that 5 and 10 minute outset. You never want to read a result after 10 minutes. So if you've got trouble, take a picture. Maybe you want to call me and text or email me the picture and we can discuss it. You just want to get a second set of eyes on it. Absolutely. Please do that. And then lastly, if you are sending to a laboratory, and again, we definitely recommend sending to a laboratory for confirmation. If you're unable to send your specimen out that same day, we do suggest that you refrigerate the specimen. That's always important. Urine isn't viable forever at room temperature, so you can give it a little helping hand by making sure you refrigerate your specimen if it's going to be a minute before you get it to your courier, your shipper, whatever it might be. All right, good. Looks like we've got a couple questions up here, so let me get to them. Unanswered. That's a thank you. That sounds great. Marianne Malik says, I've observed different shades on the test line. Some clients have used all the same shade line, while others have a very light lines, with the rest of the lines being consistent in shade. Are there elements in the urine interacting with the testing? There should not be anything that can interfere with the quality of the line. The way I try to explain it is, remember those old ink stamps? You had a date stamp and you'd have to hit the ink pad and then you hit your paper. And you could do a couple of pages and still be legible. But after a few stamps, maybe like the 3 doesn't show up anymore. So I kind of equate that to the way they apply this active dye to these strips. And it's going to be random. It may seem like patterns, but it really shouldn't be anything someone can do to their specimen to cause a line to be faint or bright. Accuracy of the saliva test versus urine from Johnny. Very close right now, actually. If you had asked me 10 years ago, I would have chuckled. we're really come so far with the oral fluids testing. I would say if we do a full average of our instant urine panels, it's somewhere in the high 98 percentile. With the oral fluids, I'd have to double check the math, but it's definitely above 95. I mean, it used to be barely 90, so they've come a long way, and we're really happy with the accuracy they've managed to get out of the saliva test. Absolutely. Will we discuss oral swab tests? Sorry, didn't mean to butcher your question, Latrell. We're not today, unfortunately, but we've talked about it. We think there's enough information there that will more than likely be our next webinar. We're going to do a live demo of the oral fluids test, how it's performed, showing you the results live on the webcam. So yeah, unfortunately not today, Latrell, but we definitely haven't forgotten about the oral fluids testing. Let's see, do you have a webinar on how to spot cheating during observed test? Christine, my adulterant webinar, which is on our website under media, is a recording of that webinar that we did. It's not so much how to spot cheating as it was about the different methods of cheating. So that might be enough to help you. Worst case scenario, and it doesn't really answer your question that way, feel free to reach out to your consultant, or our consultant will reach out to you, and we can arrange a training one-on-one or with your staff, and we can make sure we cover all those questions. Patricia says, is there audio? I hope she didn't miss the whole thing. I'm sorry. No one else mentioned an audio issue, so I'll have to find out about that. Ronald Williams says, if not going to the lab same day, what should I do if we have no fridge? That's a good question. Listen, a urine specimen has about 30 days before you really truly have to question the results. Some things like alcohol, not ETG, but just ethyl alcohol will definitely evaporate before then if not refrigerated. Even with a cap on there, you're going to lose a lot of it. Benzos have a tendency to break down a little quicker than others, especially the oxazepam. I would say if it sits out for a couple of days, as long as it's not for alcohol or benzos, it really isn't a problem. Don't put it outside in the sun or anything like that, but you should be okay for 48 hours at least. Rita asks, when is the test needs to be sent off for further testing? How do you package it up? It seems every lab has their own process for this. The lab that we're partnered with a few different labs, and the lab that probably is the most popular with our clients, you basically get all the shipping supplies, you get a specimen bag for your cup, and then you get a shipping bag for FedEx and a FedEx label, and then you either call FedEx or you just drop it off at a FedEx location. Different labs, again, may have different procedures. Some labs I've seen have couriers if they're local. If you've all gone to your doctor's office and seen a Quest box hanging outside the doctor's door, that's usually more for blood draws, but they do some urine testing there as well. So I would say better off, let's take that on a case-by-case basis. Adam mentioned I mentioned faint lines, but I noticed some of the strips like ETG always seem to be more faint than others. Good catch. Yes. Some strips, ETG especially, the dye they had to use to make an ETG test function well and function properly is actually a much thinner and lighter colored dye than the dyes that they use in the other panels. So your ETG line, even under the best of circumstances, is always going to be a little bit more faint than the rest. Also, that it's thinner, it has a tendency sometimes to run or streak a little bit. But again, really what you're looking for is mainly that color. So if you see that color in there, you're good. You've got yourself a negative. Chris Howland asked, with a very faint line, I know to consider the result negative, but doesn't mean a small amount of the substance is present or just not reaching the cutoff, or are there other reasons the line can be very faint? Again, any line, even faint or broken, should only be considered a negative result. The ETG, as we just talked about, it's naturally a more faint line. The TCA result I showed you, and it's up in the picture now, that was an absolute negative result. We sent it to the lab. There was zero, I think the lab TCA cutoff was like 5, and they found nothing. So no, you should absolutely consider a negative result. Think of it like a pregnancy test. What if you get a faint pregnancy test line? Does that mean somebody's almost pregnant? So yeah, let's go ahead and consider any faint line a negative result. Heather's question is similar. How long can a specimen be at room temperature? Let's stick with 48 hours to play it safe. Sometimes situation's going to arise and it's going to be out longer than that. And again, the worst part would be ethyl alcohol or benzos. Putting in some questions from the chat. There are other questions there. Thank you. I will definitely detect that. Check on that before we go. Yes, the detection time on oral fluids is much less than urine. lucky if we get 24 hours on any drug on the oral fluids panel. I see literature and I've seen studies showing up to like 36 hours in some cases. I've just never really seen it in practice. So while I don't want to disparage, actual scientists who've done research on this, I would say I feel better telling you guys as end users that don't expect more than 24 hours detection on oral fluids testing. Cecilia asking if buspirone can cause a positive on the fentanyl. Absolutely. Yep. That's going to happen almost reliably. So if somebody's on buspirone, most likely they're going to give you a positive fentanyl, but not every time, unfortunately. Since it's not the target substance for the test, there's no set cutoff level really, so it's going to fluctuate a lot. What prudent liquid consumption advice should be given to clients before they're tested, i.e. don't drink the extra liquids in 4 hours prior, or the I can't go liquid eliminations are recommended? I don't have a specific number for you, Erica. I've never really done the math on that one or looked up any studies on it. If you are diligent about your creatinine checking when you are reading your results, at least on the bright side, you'll know if there was too much liquids consumed. But I would say for the most part, just, drink as you normally would. Your body typically tells you, how much liquid it needs, and just, listen to your physiology. Sorry. You know what, Erica, I'm going to do some research on that one the next couple of days, and I'll see if I can find a solid answer for you. And I will, I'll send you an answer to that one, because that's interesting. Will slides be available for download? Not all staff is able to attend. John, sure. However, he's also going to be recording the entire webinar if you'd prefer. Sometimes the slides don't really say much without me narrating over them, but I'll give you that option. So I'll keep an eye out for your note when we get done. Dylan asks, I have someone who I know takes clonazepam and it does not show positive for benzo. Is there a reason for this? Yes. Clonazepam is horrible when it comes to being detected on a benzo panel. So much so that the manufacturers have developed clonazepam specific tests. So part of the reason it does not metabolize into oxazepam, which is the target drug for the benzo panel, and then the clonazepam itself, the part that is detectable in the benzo panel, does have a tendency to metabolize really quickly. It turns into alpha 7 clonazepam, I believe, and that's the target substance for the clonazepam specific test, and that's a much better solution. If you want another example of that, hydrocodone is always going to be hit or miss on both an opiate and an oxy panel. And so, again, so much so that they developed the hydrocodone specific panel. So it's definitely something to be aware of. Let's see, Chris Howland again, or following up on my follow-up. I get that the faint line is considered negative, but what would cause an unusually dark line to show as faint? Usually dark line. And again, it's just a byproduct of the manufacturing process. That, again, the example I gave you with the ink stamp, the way they apply the dyes to the raw paper on this one. What is TGC? I'm not sure what the question is. I'm not familiar with that term unless you meant TCA, which was the panel that showed a really faint line in this picture here. That's tricyclic antidepressants. Not really something people test for these days because it's not really a drug of abuse. If not, Crystal, I'll go ahead and do some research on TCG, and I'll have to follow up with you after we get done here. Angelica Vargas, does reading results before 5 minutes make a difference in terms of accuracy of results? Yes and no. If you see a line come up, a negative line come up within that 5 minute, before the 5 minute window's done, you can consider that line a negative. That line, if it comes up at like 3 to 4 minutes, it's not going away at the 10-minute mark. Really what that minimum of 5 minutes is for is if you've got a line that for some reason is taking time to develop, you want to make sure you've waited at least 5 and maybe up to that 10-minute mark to give that line a chance to develop. Sometimes, again, part of the manufacturing process, some of the lines are just a little bit slower to develop. So yes, please do give it for the positives that are looking like positives, please make sure you give it the full time. Rochelle asks, how would you recommend we discard the specimen after we finish? Easiest way is just to dump the remaining specimen into the toilet, flush it like you normally would, and then there are no disposal requirements. It's not biohazardous or anything like that. It is just throw it in your garbage can. Obviously your garbage collectors would appreciate it if the cup is completely empty of urine, just in case the bag rips. Crystal, okay, ETG, yes. ETG is ethyl glucuronide, which is the metabolite of alcohol, and it is popular now because it's detectable for up to 80 hours after alcohol is consumed. So if you're testing for alcohol now and you feel like people are using alcohol and you're not detecting it, definitely reach out. We'll have the rep reach out to you and make sure it's an option for you. Side note, and anecdotally, our lab confirmed positive rate for faint dip tests, but follow-up seems high and has been worth additional expense on our end, especially on the THC and cocaine. Interesting, Kristen. Surprising, but I guess not impossible. If you are talking about our THC and cocaine test, let's talk afterward. Maybe we can get some supporting documentation, and I can see if the QC people at the lab at the manufacturer have anything to say about that. Dylan asking if we offer specific panels for clonazepam that is available for purchase that would be more accurate than the regular cup. Again, it's not an accuracy issue so much it is a clonazepam specific issue. But yes, as of right now, we do have it only as a separate single panel dip. But yes, absolutely can get you clonazepam single panel dip, not ridiculously expensive or anything like that. Cecilia asking if all participants will receive a certificate for this training. Cecilia, please drop. Well, now I have your name in the questions, so I will make sure somebody follows up with you regarding your certificate. Absolutely. Can you repeat in regard to issue with the overfilled cup? Yes. So again, the way the tests work, it requires that urine to migrate. Again, we call that wicking, where it migrates up the strip, gets the active and inactive chemicals that are in there, the antigens and the antibodies, and it brings those with it as it travels to make the line or to prevent the line. If the urine comes in from the top, it's not going to pick up the chemicals that it needs along the way, and it could just either give you washed out, could give you nothing, might give you all positives, might give you either a wrong result or just a bunch of invalid results. So most of the cups now have a little thing on top to prevent the flooding, but it's not really liquid. It's not airtight, so something can get in there. It's better if somebody seems to have overfilled the cup, you look at it again and the results look wonky at best, then definitely take that, read the temperature strip, then take that specimen into a second cup. All right, that's all the questions. Let me check chats in case anybody's got something in there. Kristen, hoping we're going to discuss saliva. Sorry, Kristen, we'll definitely do that next time. Can we discuss positives, false positives, especially fentanyl? I think we covered that with buspirone, of course. Yep. And it just said that, okay. Detection time for framing oral fluids. We talked about that. Line so faint you have to see light. Would that be negative? Yeah, again, Dan, really what you're looking for is the color in there. Like, again, this photo that should still be up on the screen with the really, really, really faint TCA line. We do see the color of that line. So that indicates that it absolutely that dye was released, and therefore that is a negative result. Discarded specimen, we talked about that. For you, Eric, yes, your test strips does all our test ordering, communications, retail. Okay, will do. Kristen, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Tiffany. All right, a couple more questions popped up. Thought you guys were done. Have any information for Zyrtec or Certazine that causes a positive for fentanyl? No, that I have not heard of. If you have any anecdotal evidence of that, even that would be helpful to me. Compared to, say, a cocaine test, which has been around for probably 40 years, fentanyl test has only been out for 15 years. So if there's information, even if it's anecdotal, I would love to hear it. Absolutely. And yes, I will make the link for I will also post a copy, or actually I'll send these individually for the slideshow. But again, the recording of this webinar will be posted to our website for all to see. The last one by Chris Howland. I've heard situations where a caseworker will observe a faint line and then accuse the client of having a little bit of substance in their system, inaccurate, for them to make that accusation. Yeah, I completely agree, Chris. If there's a line on the test, even if it's a faint line, as someone else said under the question section, for them it's worth the extra money just to send it out to the lab to be sure. I could easily understand that reasoning, and I would never fault somebody for playing it safe. Confirmations aren't that expensive. If you have somebody who's worried about that you feel they're working the program, they're doing all the right things, and all of a sudden they get a positive and they're adamant and you believe them, but you want to just play it safe. Make sure that you send it out to a lab. It can't hurt. Okay, Ronald Woodmans, how can we get a test for gabapentin? Unfortunately, you can get in line, Ronald, at this point. Ronald. Yeah, seriously though, we had gabapentin testing on and off for a while, and apparently there is a manufacturer of a reagent, which has nothing to do with an instant test necessarily. There's a manufacturer who has sued every single manufacturer of a gabapentin test for cease and desist. So that is wending its way through the courts now, and I'm terribly sorry. As of this moment, we do not have a gabapentin test to offer you. We're hoping this gets resolved quickly because gabapentin is definitely it's definitely a drug of abuse, and its use is definitely increased. So we'll put your name into the waiting on gabapentin, Ronald, and we'll make sure we'll let you know when it becomes available. All right, guys, looks like I've kept you here 40 minutes, so I am going to go ahead and let everybody go. Again, I really, really appreciate everybody coming out and spending time with me this afternoon. It really makes me feel good to know that you guys are interested in learning more about this, and making sure you've got good answers, and making sure you understand exactly, exactly what you guys are doing all day. And I think that's great. That really, really makes me happy. So again, thank you very much. We'll get to all of the questions that we missed and all of the paperwork that people want, and link to the webinar on our website, and we'll hopefully see you next time. Again, next one's probably going to be oral fluids test. So I see you people asking, you better be there. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.